How you doing? I'm Andrew Sherman with Kelleher Sadowsky. We're here today to talk about the life science market, specifically the demand over the last several years with the amount of life science tenants, the education infrastructure we have within Massachusetts, Worcester, and Boston specifically. So we're here today to talk about the demand, the companies, where we think we're going to be going, where it's the impact of the pandemic right now. So today we're going to be sitting down with three fine gentlemen who all have specialties within the industry, all do very similar things, but all do very different things at the same time. So fortunate to work alongside all three of them in some components, one way or the other. So to start, we'll start with Jon. So Jon, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, giving a quick introduction to yourself and also MBI and what you guys do here in Worcester.
Sure. So I'm Jon Weaver with Massachusetts Biomedical Initiatives. MBI is the longest running biotech incubator in the state of Mass and home to 54 early stage life science companies. So we also are an economic development catalyst here in the city, working with our partners to promote real estate economic development projects like the Worcester Biomanufacturing Park, the Reactory, and we also run a workforce development initiative in partnership with QCC, Worcester State University, and the Massachusetts Office of Business Development.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Quentin, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Andrew. Thank you for having us.
No
Good
problem.
to be with you.
Yeah, likewise. Well, and for those who don't know McCord is a Houston-based developer, but now entered into the Massachusetts life science marketplace. So if you would take a few words to explain who McCord is and what you guys are striving to do in Massachusetts.
Yeah, we are a Houston-based, fully integrated real estate company founded in 1973. We developed or owned approximately 5 million square feet of commercial space and 6,700 apartment units. We expanded to Boston approximately a year and a half ago and are excited to recently announce our first investment in that space in Northborough at 30 Barefoot Road. And in Houston, we're the developer of a 4,200 acre commercial business park called Generation Park.
Thank you. Aaron?
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Oh, of course.
Aaron Hall, Left Field. We are project managers. We help clients, develop and support the development and support the construction in their new spaces and everything from feasibility to feasibility to close out. So
you have probably a tougher job than all, because you have to manage all of us.
Yeah, trying to manage a developer.
Right. Well, awesome. Well, thanks for all the quick intros. So going back to Jon. One of the questions that I'd always thought about is kind of where do you, if you were to go and pick a building, a facility, a location, what are the 2 or 3 components that you really look at or focus on, you and your board and your organization, as far as identifying a right sweet spot for your company?
Sure. We just went through that process. Aaron was actually a big help as we evaluated some sites. And we went through a strategic planning effort that really looked at a mix of geography, proximity to other assets, and then also kind of the core infrastructure of the building, making sure that the building was well suited to that. In the process we went through, we really found that kind of key fit for us was being close to life science existing core facilities. So we chose a building in Worcester's Gateway Park, close to WPI's core equipment, their life science bioengineering center, their new medical device center as well, and also just down the street from the UMass Medical School's project. And in looking at the building, we want to make sure it had the right utilities, all those types of pieces, but also that it had proximity to other life science assets. So I think that was a key part of the way we approached our project.
So 3 assets totaling, how much would you say square footage wise?
So MBI manages about 50,000 square feet of space, including, we just completed our project at 17 Bryden Street, which took us from 25 to 50. So we just recently, in the last few months, doubled our space here in the city, and we're already off to a great start. At our grand opening of that new facility, we already had 17 early stage companies in the door, which brought us to about 45% occupancy of that building and about 75% across our portfolio. So,
that's great.
Despite doubling our space, we've seen incredible demand for life science startups here in the city of Worcester.
That's awesome. And did you see any slowdown with the pandemic? I mean, given life sciences an essential workforce.
Yeah.
Did you see any slowdown? Do you see an uptick because of the pandemic, or how do you see that impacting their occupancy?
Yeah, so back in March, we were having some fears that maybe we underbuilt because we had really we had interest in about 80% of the space in the new building that we were taking on. We did see a quick slowdown where I think a lot of people sat on the sidelines and said maybe this isn't the time for me to start my company, but that's quickly been turning around, and now about 45% of those people came back now. We're already having conversations with an additional group that could bring us to 60 or 70% in that new building by the end of the year. So we're really bullish on the biotech cluster here in the city. And fortunately, I think for all of us, biotech has continued, and I think hopefully will be part that keeps the economy driving. I know a lot of people are hurting right now, but hopefully biotech can keep the jobs going, find a cure, and really try to help propel us into recovery.
So propelling, do you guys see yourself growing outside of Worcester? I know you guys have wanted to grow outside of this area, but what do you think will help be a catalyst to help you guys get into other markets?
Yeah, so the Worcester story is a great one, and there's a lot of good activity going on here in the city, and we want to be part of that and continue to grow here. But I think we're Massachusetts Biomedical Initiatives, so we're certainly looking at other opportunities, both east and west, to try to see how we can help foster different parts of the cluster. Our goal is how do we make, how do we support the complementary component of the cluster rather than trying to compete within the cluster? So where can MBI go, lend assets, and try to help expand the cluster's continued growth?
Well, it's a good segue into Quentin as far as what you guys do, what you specialize in, and Jon certainly helps companies grow their businesses to hopefully get into a facility such as yours, which is a 60,000 square foot building. But as far as some of the attributes that MBI might look at, what do you think a tenant would look at 30 Barefoot? Are they focused on location, or are they looking at where can I pull the most talent from? What do you think tenants are looking at right now as far as some of the key drivers and their requirements?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things, but the number one thing is really whether the space is functionally helpful to what they're trying to accomplish, their science. And so when we talk about kind of advanced stages of clinical or biomanufacturing, we're really trying to provide a space that's helpful to their progress and their pipeline. And then kind of additionally, as you pointed out, talent would be another big thing, thinking about who are the people that are going to help them pursue that research or make those therapeutics. And then finally, it's really certainty and schedule. So these companies are long-term oriented in that the approval and development process can take 10 to 15 years or even more in some cases, but the need for space and growth is very event-driven. And so they may receive favorable results or raise some capital or ultimately get some sort of approval from the FDA or whoever oversight organization they have. And so they really need someone to de-risk the real estate aspect for them and to provide that space. And Jon does that for companies that are starting, and even growing quite large now. And our hope is to kind of continue that on and provide that space and provide that functional kind of solution for them as they get bigger and bigger.
Yeah, well, that's actually what my next question was going to be, is what are some of the differentiators that McCord can provide a tenant day one? Because I know what you guys do, but it'd be great for the audience to hear is entering in this life science market, which is very competitive. There's a lot of landlords that have been doing this for a while. What do you think some of your differentiators that you need they'll set you guys apart or de-risk a tenant that doesn't know you? They might know an Alexandria or a Longfellow or a King Street.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing I should say is I have a tremendous amount of respect for everyone that does do that in the market, because they're very good at it and very good to their customers, and they're certainly valued for that reason. I think for us, it really starts with listening to the tenant and really understanding what they want and making sure that you're cognizant of that and providing that. And that's ultimately how we arrive at geography or attributes of a building, and sort of digesting kind of that narrative, that basis of design, those kind of objectives that they have, and then interpreting that internally and being honest about your blind spots, right? And trying to de-risk that, whether that's internally or working with someone like Aaron, as he does with many developers and many organizations and institutions, to provide that certainty and that solution for them.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So Aaron, as I'm sure you've worked with a variety of different tenants, landlords, developers, if you could give a couple examples of kind of how you help everyone play nicely in the sandbox, I guess, sort of say. If you were to quickly elaborate on that aspect.
Quentin hit on a couple of the big parts, but when we have a new client that comes to us and like Jon says, help us out. Really, the first thing we need to understand is the program. How is this program? What does it look like? How's it going to function in this new space? Does this space even qualify? How do we take this list of 10 or 15 potential buildings or 10 or 15 potential lots? Are we building new? Are we repositioning an existing building? And then try to fit those programs in. Those are quick exercises to say, these are real easy to get rid of these opportunities or these potentials quickly. And then like Quentin said, it's looking at that program and looking at, the building is one part, the talent pool's another part, the local ecosystem's another part. How does the science that this potential tenant have, how is that supported locally, in very close region? And then as you expand, how does that work? Is the infrastructure there to get science back and forth from some of their supporting vendors and stuff like that?
So actually, one of the things I was thinking about is, I've gone to buildings with you before, and Quentin and Aaron and Jon as well. When you go to a building and someone says we were lab ready, I feel like everyone right now is saying they're lab capable or they're lab ready. I'm sure you've heard that a bunch in the last few years, but what do you first look at a building when someone's trying to identify, can we do this? And I'm sure the answer is you can do anything with money, but on a practical standpoint, and giving your landlords a good basis to start from, a good ground to understand what they have to put into a building, what are the key components that you look at?
Really goes back to the program, because this tenant's lab the program may be a lot different than this tenant's program. So, some tenant may need just some standard BSL2 entry-level space like Jon needs, whereas Barefoot Road is more CGMP level type stuff, and those two are very different. So looking at the space and saying what level of lab are we doing here, what level of science are we doing here, and can the building even support that? Just because you're lab ready, you may not have a generator. Typically, the buildings that we're retrofitting or repositioning, all the mechanical systems need to be new to support the labs, because they're not built for labs to begin with, even though they say they're ready. But
Right.
so we are working with some developers that are building spec labs, and that in itself is a challenge, because as we build this and you get yourself very focused on a potential type of lab, and then as a user comes in, we have to be able to shift and change quickly to both support those new requirements, those new user requirements.
Got it. And given the pandemic and everything, do you see, or have you heard a conversation with tenants specifically more so that they want to be in a single tenant in a single story flex building, or are they still, is it not really progress into that, or do you think it might progress into that?
Interestingly enough, we are working with a handful of smaller users right now, because in order for them to safely develop their science, they need to expand into larger areas so that they can work in a socially distanced fashion inside their labs. So we're doing a couple of renovations right now where we're supporting tenants in multiple different buildings so that they can work safely and further apart, I guess.
And has the square footage per person changed? I mean, I guess for office, it's call it 200 square feet per person. Has that changed? I mean, life science, chemistry, biology lab is already set up for social distancing, I guess you could say, but has that number changed at all?
Not really. It really comes down to the write-up space and the we space that the people are putting into their buildings. How they're taking that back and looking at how we create a flexible space. So now we can, we have to work differently now due to the pandemic. But in 2 or 3 years, what's this going to look like? Are we going to want to be back to how everything was progressing into more collaborative workspace?
Thanks for that. And going back to John, I think we had talked about it earlier, but your success rate of 75 or your occupancy of about 75%. How many tenants? I think you said you had 50 companies. 57
We
companies.
have about 55 companies within our total incubator portfolio right now.
And so do you guys measure like from them being an MBI to growing out and going into a larger facility? Do you guys have kind of? I'm sure you can think of tenants, companies on the top of your head, but I'm just curious to know how many of those companies have gone to the next level and needed bigger scales of everything.
So we track metrics amongst our companies, and typically we're able to track those metrics typically for about the first 5 years after they graduate, at which point a lot of times new management's in, acquisitions occur, things of that nature gets tough. But we do an annual survey every year in which we try to track those numbers down. Those companies, about 79% of the companies that have graduated from MBI have what we consider successes, which means they operated outside the incubator for at least that 5-year period or were acquired. Additionally, they employ over almost 900 people in the Massachusetts economy. Almost 900 people work at companies founded at MBI. And some of those examples include companies like Viacell, which is a part of PerkinElmer, was acquired by them. There's a group called Convergent Dental that's in Needham with over 100 employees who also does some manufacturing locally. And Lake Pharma is another group that started as a company here at MBI called Blue Sky Bioservices, was eventually acquired by Lake Pharma, and now their Massachusetts presence is over 100 people. And they're actually venturing into biomanufacturing, which is one of our priority areas. So good trajectory. These companies, they start small, but they grow quickly, and they do well.
And can you elaborate on the two different kind of different sectors you have within your program? You have a scale up, and then
Sure. Yeah. So MBI has historically had what we've called our startup centers, and those centers are individual private suites for the earliest stage founders. So if they wanted to have a closet with a biosafety cabinet in it to get started, they can do that, and then they can grow over time flexibly to get up to about 600 to about 1,000 square feet. And that's historically been our model, and from that point they would leave and go off to the private sector and carry on from there. But that jump from about 1,000 square feet to about 10,000 or to about 5,000 or 10,000 square feet, which is where most of your landlords are, was tough, and that caused them to take a step they weren't really ready for. So what we've done in our new facility here with support from the Life Science Center is built what we call now our scale-up center. And that scale-up center has labs up to about 2,000 square feet with probably an average of 1 to 1,500 square feet, where companies can take 1 or 2 of those labs as kind of a teenage years, their adolescence, before they make the jump out into the private sector. It just makes that transition more, more sustainable for those companies in those really challenging early years.
That's great. And just to kind of reiterate what we were talking about earlier about Massachusetts in general, with Worcester having all the education, the colleges and whatnot, and having all the colleges and universities in Boston, at least from the brokerage side of things, I'm definitely seeing a clear path between Cambridge now to 128, now to 495 into Worcester. I think it took a long time for that to come to fruition, but I think we're almost probably right there. Would you guys say? Chime in at any point. Would you guys say that we're pretty much from Worcester to Cambridge? There's pockets popping up everywhere, I would say.
Yeah, so my predecessor, Kevin O'Sullivan, has been banging the drum on what he's called the Massachusetts Biomedical Corridor for years now, and it really feels like that biomedical corridor between Cambridge and Worcester is really coming to reality. And we're promoting this concept of Kendall Square to Lincoln Square here in Worcester, and trying to find ways to be complementary of the cluster. Worcester shouldn't necessarily be competing with Cambridge. Cambridge is a world-class epicenter of biotech technology. But what are the parts of that industry that could be located outside the city, and how might that better serve us all? And how can we take advantage of all of the assets throughout the Commonwealth to make a more sustainable growth path for the industry as it continues to explode?
Yeah, I agree. I think especially to your last point, John, about competitive versus collaborative. It's not. There seems to be this conventional narrative that you're in one place or another, and increasingly that's less the case. There's collaboration that occurs in all these different places, and I think what we're seeing is some of these companies are now having multiple locations simply because either A, they're trying to reach a wider pool of talent and not compete for those same people within one location, or B, they might have different needs. You know, you might have a company that is looking to do more R&D in downtown Worcester or in downtown Kendall Square or Watertown or Boston, and look for those lunchtime and, you know, notwithstanding pandemic, you know, actual interactions on the street. Whereas you have other kind of uses of these spaces as they grow that would be for more biomanufacturing or the supply chain, where it's much more of a, we need a repeatable, reliable process, and we need to be that, you know, environment that's a little bit different of the exploratory, I would say. And so they're kind of, you know, orienting those uses and looking at all these different markets, Worcester, Boston, everywhere in between, north and south, to sort of, you know, try to meet those needs.
Excuse me, I'm just blocking out what I'm only going to say.
Cut that out.
But one of the questions that I had, I lost it on the top of my head. But Aaron, have you seen any themes or kind of underlying common denominators for project costs with the pandemic, as far as tenant build-outs? I mean, are folks looking to bifurcate their offices? Maybe if they have, say, 100,000 square feet in Cambridge, are folks looking to maybe say, I'll do 20,000 square feet of office in somewhere in the urban Boston, but then I want to do, you know, 50,000 square feet out in the suburbs? Are you seeing that at all?
Not so much. You know, what we are seeing is just a change in their behaviors and how they're working. You know, you know, they may have different shifts or different hours that they're working, but I don't think anybody's really, at least our clients, haven't jumped and said, all right, we have to completely change how we work and go get new space just because of the pandemic. I think for the immediate time, they're going to just change their work behaviors and their work practices instead of going out and making a bunch of new capital expenses.
Sure.
We have seen, you know, some pricing come down. You know, some of the bigger subcontractors are, you know, they're not as aggressive. They're still pretty picky about who they're working for. They want to work for good clients. They want to get paid on time. And some of the smaller subcontractors are you know, they are getting a little bit more aggressive than they had been. But material prices continue to escalate. There's a lot of demand in the industry, especially locally right here. So we haven't seen as big of a drop in the life science costs as we would hope that the pandemic would put pressure on.
Yeah, I feel like office is, you know, taking kind of a pause right now, but the life science world seems like hasn't really skipped a beat.
It hasn't slowed down.
Yeah. And we haven't seen it slow down either, so it's impressive that they've been able to weather the storm, whether you're a life science startup or looking at a 60,000 square foot GMP facility. So that's about all I had for today. So I appreciate all you guys' time. It's good educational talk. So hopefully we'll do this again soon.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. We appreciate your time. It's been great to talk with Aaron, Quentin, and Jon regarding the life science market in Massachusetts. So from Kelleher and Sadowsky and the rest of the team here, thanks. And if you ever have any needs regarding relocations, renewals, site selections, questions, feel free to call us at any time. As Kelleher and Sadowsky is expanding into the Boston market, Metro West primarily, then into 128, feel free to give us a call for any questions or inquiries. Thanks so much.